Varimir woke suddenly, violently, his whole body shaking.
"Get up!"
A voice was screaming.
"Get up! We have to go! There are hundreds of them!"
The snow had covered him with a stiff white blanket. So cold. When he tried to move, he found that his hand had frozen to the ground. He had left some skin behind when he tore it loose.
"Get up!"
She screamed again.
"They're coming!"
Thistle had returned to him. She had him by the shoulders and was shaking him, shouting in his face. Varimir could smell her breath and feel the warmth of it upon cheeks gone numb with cold. Now, he thought, do it now, or die. He summoned all the strength still in him, leapt out of his own skin, and forced himself inside her. Thistle arched her back and screamed, "Abomination!" Was that her, or him, or Hagen? He never knew. His old flesh fell back into the snowdrift as her fingers loosened. The spearwife twisted violently, shrieking. His shadow cat used to fight him wildly, and the snow bear had gone half mad for a time, snapping at trees and rocks and empty air. But this was worse.
"Get out! Get out!"
He heard her own mouth shouting. Her body staggered, fell, and rose again. Her hands flailed, her legs jerked this way and that in some grotesque dance as his spirit and her own fought for the flesh. She sucked down a mouthful of the frigid air, and Varimir had half a heartbeat to glory in the taste of it, and the strength of this young body, before her teeth snapped together and filled his mouth with blood. She raised her hands to his face. He tried to push them down again, but the hands would not obey, and she was clawing at his eyes. Abomination! He remembered, drowning in blood and pain and madness. When he tried to scream, she spat their tongue out. That was a selected excerpt from the prologue to A Dance with Dragons, the 5th book in the A Song of Ice and Fire series, and the only time in the series outside of interactions with Bran and Hodor that we get to see what it's like when one person attempts to warg another person's body. So why do I think this passage might help us identify whether or not Howland Reed attempted to warg or skin change into Arthur Dayne at the Tower of Joy? While many people believe that warging human beings may actually be relatively easy because of what we see with Bran and Hodor, I think many readers forget that Hodor is a very special case, basically a vessel specifically formed to take Bran's consciousness that Bran created using time travel. And so I would argue that he's the exception rather than the rule. Whereas in this Varimir excerpt, we see a very powerful and adept skin changer, somebody arguably much more in control of their skills than Bran, and we see them attempting to do what many readers and theorists have argued Howland Reed may have done to Arthur Dayne at the Tower of Joy fight. And I would say there are two important things to note about this. One, it appears to kill Varimir, or at the very least, this seems dangerous and to certainly have the potential to kill somebody. And second, let's not kid ourselves here. Thistle flips the fuck out. Like, this is a very, very intense reaction. And I think these two problems kind of highlight two things that are missing that we should be expecting to see if Howland Reed is in fact a skin-changing warg capable of taking over Arthur Dayne's body and surviving the encounter. One would be some kind of mention and or demonstration of these powers, and the other would be some kind of PTSD recollection of Ned Stark thinking about Arthur Dayne ripping his helm off, spitting out his own tongue, and pulling out his eyeballs before dying. Now, the latter we obviously never see, but the former we actually potentially get some evidence against. And so I'm going to present some passages of conversations between Bran and Meera, which makes me think that Howland Reed probably does not himself possess any drastically powerful green abilities, if even any.
"The lad knew the magics of the Crannogs,"
she continued,
"but he wanted more. Our people seldom travel far from home, you know. We are small folk, and our ways seem queer to some, so the big people do not always treat us kindly. But this lad was bolder than most, and one day when he had grown to manhood, he decided he would leave the Crannogs and visit the Isle of Faces. No one visits the Isle of Faces, objected Bran. That's where the green men live. It was the green men he meant to find. Did he meet the green men? Yes, said Mira. But that's another story, and not for me to tell.
So when people hear stuff like that, I imagine their first instinct is to think that Howland Reed was taught to use warging powers by the Green Men or something like that. However, in this same passage, we receive this little tidbit.
Bran was almost certain he had never heard this story. Did he have green dreams like Jojen? No, said Mira.
So, while it's perfectly reasonable to assume that Howland Reed did in fact go to the Isle of Faces, maybe even met the Green Men, I don't think we have any evidence to show that Howland Reed is even the kind of person who could be engaging in warging. He doesn't even have green dreams. We know Jojen's not a warg and he has green dreams, and we know that being a green dreamer is kind of a prerequisite for being a high-level warg like Bran. So, while I think this is fertile ground for speculation on perhaps what the Green Men told Howland or what interesting things he found out about the Isle of Faces when he was there, I don't think we really see anything in the book that indicates that Howland Reed is a warg or even is capable of being a warg. And again, I think the idea that because Bran wargs Hodor, that Howland Reed could have warged Arthur Dayne, relies on kind of an unsound premise, in that Hodor is a bit of an exception and not the rule. So what exactly happened at the Tower of Joy? Well, only George can tell us, but if you'd like my opinion on what I think Howland Reed did contribute to the fight, you can always go watch my video about the Tower of Joy. On a quick side note, sorry it's just such a short video this time. I'm working on some longer ones, and hopefully those will be done soon. But I wanted to give you guys just a little something to tide you over, because I felt pretty bad because it's been like 2 months. So I hope you enjoyed this little tidbit, and I will see you next time.